Hi, everyone. Welcome to Buddhism Talks. I am extra excited today because what we're going to talk about is courage. And I think at this moment in history is probably one of the most important traits to strengthen in our own lives and to strengthen in society. So we're going to talk a little bit about the Buddhist perspective of courage and why it's actually one of the qualities of enlightenment. So normally when you think of Buddhahood or enlightenment or being in that Zen state, courage isn't the first thing that comes to mind, but it's actually one of the most important aspects of Buddhahood and this enlightened state. So we're going to talk about that and why without courage, it's very difficult to be truly happy. It's very difficult to achieve a lot of things without courage. And the part that I'm the most excited about is that I have my very close friend, Jenny Morrison, with me, and she is joining us from Spain. So hi, Jenny.
Hi, Lydia. Thank you so much for inviting me on Buddhist Talks. I feel very privileged and very happy to be here from the other side of the Atlantic.
Yes. And can you show us a little bit of Spain? Can you
Yeah,
swivel your computer around?
it's sweltering. It's over 100 degrees right now.
Oh my gosh, I don't know what that is in Celsius.
View from my
But
window.
there are the hills of Spain. So for everybody now, you just got a little dose of a trip to Spain. And I'm so happy to have you with us, Jenny. So to start, I just want to very lightly touch on some of the reasons why courage is so important in life and particularly why it's highlighted in this Buddhism. I went to the NichirenLibrary.org website that has all of the writings from Nichiren Daishonin, and I simply did a search on the word courage. And then I also did a search on the word coward and cowardice. So courage comes up in 11 writings and coward or cowardice is in 8. So that's like 19 writings that talk about the importance of courage. I'm just going to read just a few quotes just to give you a sense of how important courage is and how connected to faith it is. So he says, each of you should summon up the courage of a lion king and never succumb to threats from anyone. And the other thing that's always very present in Nichiren's writings is this idea of becoming lions. I know Jenny and I both feel very strongly about that imagery, but more importantly, that spirit of being as strong as a lion and not fearing any other beasts. And he also says it is a lack of courage that prevents one from attaining Buddhahood. In terms of bringing out your enlightened nature, that is one of the reasons why you might not be able to have your full potential come out and also the full power of your practice. So there's many people who chant and practice this Buddhism, and he's reminding us that if you have a lack of courage, the result that will come out of your practice is limited. And then let's get to the opposite, where he talks about how harmful cowardice is. He says in a reply to Kyogo, your faith alone will determine all these things. A sword is useless in the hands of a coward. The mighty sword of the Lotus Sutra must be wielded by one courageous in faith. He also said, have profound faith. A coward cannot have any of his prayers answered. And that's got to be one of the strictest lines. So that's just the beginning, because I know sometimes not everybody listens to the whole podcast. I wanted to leave you with a few quotes, with a few inspirations on the importance of courage. And for today, I get the great good fortune to hang out with Jenny. We're going to talk a little bit about her life, her experiences, her practice. Jenny, for me, has always been somebody that has an incredibly courageous spirit, is undefeatable, and is always an inspiration for me. So whenever I need a little dose of courage and spirit and passion and clarity that comes from that, I will call up Jenny. So I'm happy to share Jenny with all of you today. And we're going to get to hear a little bit about her past and the examples of courage from your life. I would like to ask if you could share the story about your grandfather, because I think that is such an incredible story and example of courage.
I'd be delighted. My grandfather, who was called Henry Boniface, lived in Eastbourne, and he was a fisherman of his own business, and he had 5 or 6 little boats. And in 1940, Operation Dynamo came after the German invasion in France. Our English Admiralty called it Operation Dynamo. And basically, the big ships were going over to Dunkirk to get soldiers off the beaches. 2/3 were British and 1/3 were French. The Germans were coming in and we had to withdraw, we had to get out. And Dunkirk was one of the best, easiest locations for people to be dragged off the beaches, literally. So the Admiralty realised they couldn't get the big ships close enough to the beach to get the boys off. It would be too far. They couldn't wade through the water and they couldn't swim. And especially if the Germans were opening fire, a lot of them would have lost their lives. It would have been impossible. So the Admiralty decided to ask different people who were fishermen or other any kind of business to do with the sea who had little ships. And this was known as the Little Ships Endeavour. And my grandfather was actually invited to use his little ships with all his crew who went along with him to go over and as part of this massive flotilla that was sailing to Dunkirk to get these boys off the beaches. He couldn't wait. As far as he was concerned, it was a big adventure. He had
Wow.
no fear whatsoever. Now, this man was really courageous. And off he'd go with his men. And because he had that courageous spirit, every member of crew went with him. So his entire fleet were going backwards and forwards to Dunkirk, bringing soldiers off the beaches. And sometimes there were times when Germans were opening fire and the bullets were whistling past them. But of course, what they'd do, they'd go to the beach, get the boys into their little ships, as it was called, take the little ships out to the bigger ships, and the boys would be offloaded. Then they go back for more and go backwards and forwards constantly with these bullets whistling past their ears. They also used to go backwards and forwards over the channel as well. So he was up day and night. Winston Churchill imagined that they'd be able to get 200,000 max, but they managed to get 338,000 off the beach.
Wow.
It was literally called the Dunkirk Miracle. One of these trips, he was on his way back, and the Luftwaffe were flying overhead. And they were starting to dive bomb all these the little ships and the big ones because they were all coming back together on this occasion. And suddenly a great sea mist came up, and it meant that the mist was just enough that the ships could see where they were going and navigate through it, but the Luftwaffe could not because they couldn't fly low enough to actually carry on with their bombing campaign. So they had to abort. So that was amazing.
I remember talking about this a couple of years ago, this idea that sometimes nature can provide a protective cover for us. We should never lose hope because sometimes there's things that can happen that we cannot imagine. So we should always maintain hope. Maybe our brains can't figure out a way out and we don't exactly know how it's going to end. The fact that there was this incredible fog that covered and protected all of the soldiers, including your grandfather, is got to be one of the most hopeful stories.
As far as he was concerned, it was a huge adventure. He was so busy saving lives together with his crew, together with all the other men who were heroes as well, all of them were. He was too busy saving lives to actually feel fear at all. And as far as he was concerned, it was fun, it was exciting. It used to drive my grandmother crazy. He'd come back and his clothes were stiff from the salt water. Because obviously he had to go wade up to get them and put soldiers over his shoulder and take them back to his little ships and get them on board. And when the guns were whistling and the bullets were whistling past his ears, that was the sort of best bit for him. Because as far as he was, because the adrenaline was incredible, but he was saving lives.
And the amazing thing is, you had just said that the reason he was so unshaken because he was so committed to saving the lives of people, right? That kind of compassion and those values is what led to this unshakable courage. And we're going to speak about this a little bit later, but the opposite of that is that cowardice actually leads to cruelty. That's the polar opposite. Cowardice leads to cruelty and suffering, whereas compassion will bring out courage. The two are often linked. And I just wanted to share an image that really marked me. You said that sometimes his clothes were so stiffened by salt, your grandmother had to cut them off of him, right? That's an incredible image to have in your mind.
Terrified that she may never see her husband again. And they'd had 7 children, 7 girls between them, a single mother with 7 daughters. That would have been a bit scary.
Oh, I'm sure. So both your grandmother and your grandfather survived the war, and eventually you were born. And I really feel like when we speak, it's almost like there is this generational courage that you have inherited as well. And I know you've had many instances where you have had to stand up to bosses, to men, to all kinds of people. there's an aspect of you that's, I feel, almost enjoys the fight, just like your grandfather, because the battle is a just battle. It's a battle that is based in compassion and goodness and humanity. So there's a power that comes from that. So I just want to ask you if you could share another example from your youth where you yourself had really showed exceptional courage, even as a young person. So you know which story I'm talking about.
Well, I was 7 years old, and my sister was 5 years older than me, and we decided to get on our bikes and go and ride to one of the shops. But we had to go through a wooded area, and we wanted to get there before the shops closed. So we went through the woods, and we were always told never to go through there. It had a lot of rain. We had to actually get off our bikes and walk with them. So my sister and her friend were one side of the path, and I was the other. And then when we got to a clearing, we all suddenly noticed a gentleman coming towards us. He was wearing a grey pinstripe suit and a grey blue tie and a white shirt. I can remember it vividly coming towards us. And he had a big black bike, and he was coming towards us. So we sort of made room for him. As he got level with my sister and her friend, he pushed his bike, rammed it into them, and they fell backwards with the bikes on top of them. And I loved myself, so in awe of my big sister. There was somebody attacking my sister, this big 6-footer. So I literally jumped at him. I climbed on his back. I got hold of his hair. I pulled his collar. I was hitting him with my fists as hard as I could. My sister, how dare you? How dare you? And I was seven years old. And I was trying to pull his collar. I thought I might throttle him and then he'd give up the chase. But as this happened, fortunately, I must have had an effect on him because he suddenly sort of backed off, which gave the girls a chance to crawl out from under their bikes and run like the billy-o. So they disappeared. They just ran. They thought I was with them, obviously. And I was standing there, and I was about to run myself, and he suddenly turned to me, and he had a knife in his hand, and he waved it in front of my face, and he said, "Don't be afraid, little girl." And the knife didn't scare me as much as his eyes. When I had eye contact with this man, I realized that he was subhuman. There was something about him, really cold, icy blue eyes looking at me. I felt in my heart, even at the age of 7, this man was on a mission. And I thought, am I going to get out of this? He might, and I looked at his eyes. I froze. I absolutely froze. I couldn't move. And then suddenly my sister realized that I wasn't with them, came straight back for me. And as soon as she grabbed hold of my arm, I let out a blood-curdling scream with all my might. And my voice does carry. So that was fortunate. And all of a sudden, as if from nowhere, people started appearing from bushes and little picnic areas. You suddenly saw these heads popping up. So the man gave up chase, and when we ran away, we got out of the woods, we saw a police box, and for me that was so exciting. We had to smash the glass and pick up a telephone receiver and literally say, we need the police now. My sister
Wow.
did that, and for me it was so exciting. Gosh, we're using a police box. But as far as I was concerned, it was all a huge adventure, but I've never felt so afraid in all my life. But I would never regret it because I would do it again and again because anyone attacking my sister, I mean, they were treading on very dangerous ground. The police were already looking for this man and because the little girl was in hospital extremely ill with knife wounds. And this guy fitted the description to a T.
I just think it's an incredible story, and I find it inspiring, even, everyone has very different backgrounds. Some people did not have the voice to scream or could not have. We've all gone through various things in our lives.
Yes.
But I think moving forward from this moment on, I think a story like yours is just a great reminder of courage. That's an example of the kind of spirit I would want to have no matter what happens, that you can speak out, that you can roar, that you can yell and you fight till the end, no matter what's happening. And I think sometimes people might feel like, oh, I don't need to be that courageous. But at the same time, the reward of having that kind of courage is just the fearlessness, the freedom, the power of your life becomes huge if you want to, if you make the determination to have that kind of courage. There's a power that's unleashed when you decide to live that way. It is part of the qualities of enlightenment, right? Courage, compassion, and wisdom. And that's why they're so powerful. So, because I know for some people, it might be like, I don't want to be that courageous. Like, I didn't really sign up for that. Like, I just want to get a job and be happier. But at the same time, when we practice Buddhism, we are encouraged to bring out this incredibly powerful spirit that leads to so much benefit of various kinds. I just want to fast forward to when you actually started practicing Buddhism, because
Well,
that happened later on after many battles in life and many victories in life, and amazing spirit throughout. So how did you start practicing Buddhism? Like,
well, basically, I was in the health and fitness industry by this time, and it was the very, very beginning of it. It was great because it was still so new. And I was in central London, and I was running a business for a very famous country music promoter, entrepreneur. While I was there, it was a very, very difficult man to work for. He's somebody I had to stand up to over and over and over again, countless times. But I did it. I was a single mother by that time, two children in very good schools. Because I was running this health club for him and I was on commission and everything, it was well paid and it covered my bills. And I was able to live in central London and educate my children. So that was happening. But I was asked to actually write a book on how to, it was literally entitled Dance, Exercise Your Way to a Fortune. So I'd written a whole chapter on this, and that had to be checked. Britain was one of the very first educators in the Montessori schools in London. He was one of the original people who started it. He was a professor of English. So, of course, he was the perfect person to go through this with me because he also had a law degree. So I was introduced to Ron Britton and we started working together. He'd go through it with me and he'd help with the editing. It had already been edited, but he went through to get the facts right, certainly on the business stroke legal section that I'd written. He was a great guy, a lot older than me, but he was a lovely old, crazy old professor. And he said, I think we should take a break, Jen. He said, we'll take a nice bottle of wine and a chunk of cheese and we'll go down to the river. It was a particularly beautiful day. And so we sat there chatting, and suddenly he looked at me and he said, are you religious? And I thought, oh, no, no. And I sort of snapped back, why? Why? I was very, very on the defensive guy, and I just didn't have any belief in any religion at that time. I knew there was something, and I knew that I was searching for something, but I certainly hadn't found it. So I said, no, I'm not. Why? So he said, well, I'm a Buddhist. I said, what? What? A Buddhist? Wow. Well, tell me. I was so interested. I thought, wow. And he told me about, he'd only been practicing 2 weeks himself. He
wow.
really just started practicing.
What year was this?
This was in 1983,
Wow,
in
1983.
August
Okay.
1983. And I asked him loads of questions. How do you do it? What is it? Namyo Horenge. And when he said to me, it can change your life, that did it for me because I was a single mother. I was finding life very, very difficult at the time. And emotionally, financially, in every way, life was very, very tough. And I was fairly kicked out of shape, if you like, because it was a very bitter separation from my children's father. Very, very bad. So anyway, I was ready. I was absolutely ready to hear about Buddhism. What do you do? Because at first, when he told me, I thought, you march down Oxford Street ringing bells, wearing white robes.
When are you going to shave your head? Yeah.
Exactly. Those were my questions. And he still had, although it was sparse, he still had some hair. So I knew it was that form of Buddhism. But then he said it was Nichiren Daishonin's Buddhism and you can change your life. And it doesn't matter who you are, where you're from, what race you are, whatever. It just embraces absolutely everybody on the planet. And I said, I'm in. And he said, you can change your life completely with this wonderful practice. So I said, where do we go? How do I find out? Where do we go and chant? What is it you said we chanted? And I was so into it. I couldn't wait to get to my first meeting. So when I went
Wow.
to my first meeting, it was the room, it was a lovely, lovely apartment in central London. And the lounge was absolutely filled to capacity. And I had no idea what they were chanting to. It looked like a bowl of fruit from where I was sitting.
I've heard that before where people walk in, they're like, is this a pineapple worshiping cult?
I thought, oh no, I was quite
No.
a bowl of fruit. So, okay, well, I didn't know how to chant, so I just sat there and listened. And then at the end of it, they did their last Nam-myoho Renge Kyos to actually bring the prayers to a close. And everyone sat round, and then they started sharing their experiences, how Buddhism had worked for them, and the incredible things that they had battled through, the challenges they'd had, and how they'd coped, not coped, but how they'd won victories one after the other. You win one victory, as Napoleon says, which leads you to go on to actually ask and look for your next challenge to win your next victory. So I was so thrilled with this. I thought, I've got to do this. And I immediately wrote Nam-myoho Renge Kyo down on a piece of paper. Actually, it was in a paying in book, which I thought was quite interesting,
Depositing spiritual good fortune.
in my bank. So
Yes.
that very next morning, I got up and I found a very lovely sort of empty space on the wall in the apartment. And I started to chant the words Nam-myoho Renge Kyo. And as soon as I started chanting, I felt an amazing shift. Every single cell in my body had changed. I imagined a great pile of sand, a pyramid of sand, and somebody putting their finger in the bottom of it, this great ton of sand. Every single particle would move. And it felt just like that. Every single particle of me shifted. And I knew instinctively that I'd reached home. I'd found the religion and philosophy of my dreams. I always knew there was something more than this world and just us. I was so full of questions. I wanted to find out why I was here, how come this was happening, and to understand the law of cause and effect and karma, of course, which is a very deep subject, as we both know. But it's the cause and the causes and the effects, and to listen to these experiences was so dynamic, it was so inspiring. I couldn't wait to get back and start chanting. But that's how I started to practice, and I've never looked back after over
And
40 years.
you've always been somebody who's such a powerful chanter. Like I've chanted with you, many times. And I think we align very much in our spirit, in our chanting. It's always lion like. It's always Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, Nam Myoho Renge Kyo. Right? It's this. Yeah, that's right. It's that kind of spirit. And I think that's, all Nam-myoho Renge Kyos are valuable. But at the same time, this is why we study and read the writings of Nichiren Daishonin and Daisaku Ikeda. It is to be reminded of the depths of spirit that we can bring out. Like if you look at Nichiren's writings, he always says, muster your faith. Right. And that means faith is not something that I did it, I got a little benefit, it's great, or I got some big benefits. But, it doesn't matter how many years go by, he's always saying, muster your faith. So there's an energy that I know that you always put into your chanting. It is a mustering creative process for you when you chant, right? And similarly, when I was younger, I was born Catholic, and I had a little bit of a seeking mind, not so much for religion, but to understand how life worked. And so I did, and all I had was the Bible, right? So I actually read the Bible as a young person. I read it several times. I read a children's version with graphic cartoons, and
I remember.
and I read the other one, and I just thought I just felt it just wasn't the full explanation, and I understood that there's something holding it, like there's a rhyme and reason, there's a rhythm, there's meaning, there's something that's holding the universe together, but I could not accept this idea of an external God that determines all things. Like there was aspects of it that I could not accept. But I thought there's a right and a wrong. I believed in a goodness and an evil. I believed in construction versus destruction. So there were principles that I knew to be true from my own heart, from my own life. And I just didn't have an explanation for it all. And then Buddhism comes around and you're like, here we go. Here's the explanation. And not only is this explanation consistent with science and other philosophies that are really great out there, like Stoicism has got some great stuff in it. There's other things that have gone on over the history of humanity where there's truths. Truths have been revealed over and over. And I know Willie's an expert on history. So I know he knows there's all kinds of truths that have been revealed over time. But the challenge is to have a practice where you can implement that truth. and change your body and and not so much change your body, but have a very real effect on your life that's practical and useful. And it's funny because in the other podcast, Paul Sherman quoted Makaguchi, and Makaguchi said the original purpose of the first discussion meetings of the Soka Gakkai were really to set up an experiment to test kind of the power of goodness. That's not the exact wording Paul used, but what I got out of it was that Makaguchi wanted to get people together who practiced this Buddhism and then give testimonials as an experiment. It was almost like scientific approach. It's like we're going to have these meetings and I want to hear from everybody. Can goodness win? What is the power of goodness when it is fully nourished and fully empowered, which is what Namyo Horenge Kyo does for us. And that's what testimonials were. They were a research experiment. Can the goodness of the human spirit win? And I think that has been one of the reasons why we still practice decades later, is because chanting and this practice allows us to have goodness win, right, in our lives and create that in our environment. And then after that, you practiced for a long time in England. You were co-headquarter leaders, right, of North
Yes.
Kensington headquarters in London. You've had so many experiences in these decades, right? And I know the two big ones in terms of Buddhism that I know of, I'm sure you've had many, many, but one is to do with health and overcoming health challenges. And another one, which I always go back to when I'm looking for encouragement in my heart, is also financial, being at a point where you could almost lose everything. And what I really love is that there was a senior leader at one point in the UK who said, to really understand faith, you might have to lose everything. And then it happened. Not so much to understand it, but to the test of faith sometimes is these really difficult challenges. But you transformed all of it. So do you want to talk about the financial one right now? Because I know there might be a lot of people struggling with that currently. So if you want to share that experience, that'd be amazing.
I'd love to. Thank you, Lydia. Basically, I met my darling husband, my second husband, through Buddhism. And I met him at one of our wonderful discussion meetings. And at first, we were very, very good friends, but it wasn't long before we became more than friends. I'd found my spiritual partner in life, and he took this Buddhism as I did, like duck to water. So the pair of us together were like the two wings of a bird flying together. It was quite remarkable. That was a miracle, really, to actually meet a man who literally fitted like a glove, really, in my life, so we could work together as bodhisattvas of the earth to change our karma together. Because obviously, on your own, you have your karma to change, your life. When you meet a partner, it's a collective karma that you have together. I've always known feast and famine. My mother came from an ordinary background financially. They were comfortable, they could live. Okay, my lovely grandfather with his boats and his fishing. And then there was my father, who came from a very wealthy background, very, very different to my mother. Financially, we've experienced feast and famine because my father was not a businessman. He had everything handed to him on a plate. He'd never had to work for anything. And so he really didn't know how to run a business. He inherited the business from my grandfather on my father's side. He just couldn't handle it. He just was not a businessman. So we went through a lot of money and we ended up with virtually nothing. It was up and down. It was always feast and famine. And then when I was with my first husband, it was much the same. That was when I was in the theatre. I was an actress at the time as a young girl, and that's how I met my first husband, my children's father. And he gave me an ultimatum because I was just at the beginning of getting parts and getting myself established as an actress in London. And he was very jealous and he didn't want me acting. He said, you've got to make a choice. Either it's me or it's your acting career. So I was so in love and so silly what I chose. But obviously my life was meant to go that way. And it didn't matter had there been the slightest difference, I may never have met this Buddhism. But anyway, cut a long story short, we went through lots of highs and lows, you can imagine, being in the theatre.
So you did actually stop acting because he said you picked him over the acting?
Yes, but it was strange because he had his own company, Robert Cooper Theatre Company, and if ever an actor went sick, I'd be learning the lines one night and I'd be on stage the following day, having learned a lead role. So you see,
So he
he wanted.
still used you when he needed. Yeah.
And of course, I jumped at the opportunity every time because I loved being on stage. I loved acting, loved it. That aside, on the financial side, met my husband Willie, the love of my life, and he and I both went through a nosedive. Actually, I couldn't work because I was struggling fighting cancer, so I was unable to work, and he could not. He just could not get. He was in the music business, as we
Yeah,
all
not the
know.
most.
It's
So
a very very tricky business. It's like winning the football pools. It's more or
yeah.
less to get that smash. Willie has experienced a few smashes in his time, and he's done very very well. But we went through a phase where we had absolutely no money whatsoever, and we were living in a rented apartment. We had to sell our house because we got nothing. And I was struggling with cancer and I wanted to go with the gynecologist I was using, and he advised that I needed surgery. And so we literally sold the house to raise some money, and we moved into a rented apartment. And we were there for 6 years. We were lucky to have an apartment to live in, quite frankly, because we were so hard up. We went through very hard times because Willie was working for a small label in the music business. This very small company hadn't long been in business, so they were starting from scratch. So there was very little money. And over 3 years, he literally earned a few thousand pounds. And we ended up with virtually nothing. And it was 2 weeks before Christmas. And we had a tenner between us and £10 between us. And we thought we would like, because we have what we call a fund, a Kozen Rufu fund.
Just to clarify on this idea of an SGI fund, there is obviously an opportunity to donate. This is a not for profit organization. The amazing thing is, there is very little mention of it and very little talk because nobody wants to equate practicing Buddhism with money. So, but at the same time, we live in the real world. And those of us that practice for a long period of time and feel grateful to have the practice in our lives, it's very natural to want to donate money for the operation of the centers, for the magazines, for putting the lights on and the fax machine. So there is an opportunity to donate, but it's not a central part of the practice.
We donate because we wish to. It's not
Exactly.
an obligation for anyone. Nobody's
Exactly.
expected to. There's no expectations at all. It literally comes from your own heart.
So here you are with 10 pounds between the two of you, and the first thing you're thinking of is, go ahead, Jenny.
We were thinking that we'd like to give a donation, and so we thought we'll do 50-50. We'll put £5 into the donation fund. As I say, it's not obligatory. You don't have to, but we wish to do it. We wanted to do it to show our gratitude for this wonderful practice. And we had £5 left. We thought we trusted. We just trusted. We really did. And all we had in the fridge was a pound of sausages and some frozen peas in the freezer. And we had some bread and just very basic things, bread and butter and the odd potato. So when we went home, there had been a massive power cut because somebody had arsoned a house, set it alight down the road from where we were. And so obviously the whole grid went down. So we were without electricity for about 12 hours. So we had to get these peas and the sausages, all we had to our name, out of the freezer and cook everything because it was so bad and we were so poor at that time. We literally sat there with no heating because there was no electricity, no light, just a candle in front of our gohonzon, which is what we chant to. Probably, Lydia, you have mentioned this before to our audience, but basically the gohonzon is the mandala that we chant to. And we were literally chanting hours of Daimoku, Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, to change the situation. We just felt intuitively that we'd reached rock bottom. We were on our very last legs financially. Everything had gone.
And actually, if you could say a little bit more about how you chanted at that moment, because that's a crucial moment, right? Like Nichiren Daishonin says, when the crucial moment comes, the wise will rejoice and the foolish will retreat. Basically saying you're going to hit a crucial moment. And that's the moment to rejoice and recommit and redetermine and be more courageous than ever. What was going through your heads, and how were your prayers changing as you chanted?
Well,
Like how did you get the courage and the determination come back up again in that moment?
to me, it was exciting.
Sorry, of course, because you're your grandfather's granddaughter.
Exactly. I've always felt it was a generational thing, always. But anyway, for me, it was exciting because I knew that from this huge challenge financially, through practicing this wonderful Buddhism, we would see profound, deep changes in our lives through going through the challenge. This is where the courage comes in. Because when you chant to change anything, things come up, challenges come up, things come up from pop up from your karma. We don't know what is in our karma. We know nothing about our karma. We bring it with us from previous lives and we take it into the future. And it's up to us what we do with it, how we want to change, what we want to change. But when we decide we want to change something, obviously we wanted to change our financial karma. We wanted to get stability in our lives. My husband had been through a lot of instability financially with his parents, as I had with mine, and with my first husband as well. So it followed right the way through our lives, feast and famine. And we wanted something secure. We wanted something stable and secure, the pair of us. And that's what we chanted for. But it was exciting because I knew in my heart that the most unexpected things happen. When you take on a challenge like that, unexpected things pop up. And while we were chanted for hours. And we had nothing else to do. We couldn't read, you couldn't do anything, couldn't put on the television, watch a decent movie. We had
What else are you
fingers
gonna
crossed.
do?
And we were
Exactly.
frozen. It was ice on the ground. It was freezing temperatures in central London. Woo. So we were chanting our socks off. And suddenly the phone went. Well, a few years ago, an aunt had died who I'd never met, my father's sister, held me in her arms when I was 2 days old, but I never remembered her, obviously. And she was Auntie Eileen, and she was a great adventurer, and she'd been traveling around the world, and she suddenly died, and she left some of her assets to my brother, my sister, and myself. It was divided equally, a section of what she'd left. She left a small cottage and it was to be sold, and we were to have a third each. But this was about 4 years before I received this phone call. In fact, it was so long ago that we actually forgot that I'd even got an inheritance at all, because the
Wow.
other person who was going to be getting a portion of it was one of her best friends, and she didn't want us receiving anything. She tried to legally, she tried to sort of get us out of the will. So it went into probate. Well, all this legal toing and froing was going on. So, of course, it was reducing and reducing and reducing because of all this legal wrangle. It was like, what? So, after 3 or 4 years, there we were chanting, fingerless gloves, frozen to the marrow. And suddenly the phone rang, and it was my lawyer who was handling this for me. And he said, is that Jenny Morrison? I said, yes, speaking. How can I help you? I didn't recognize who it was. It was so long ago I'd spoken to him. And he said, your inheritance has come through. May I have your bank details?
Wow. Right in that moment.
Right in that moment. And then Willie, a few days later, he had been working with an act on the side, not directly with the company, but part of the company, but this was his baby. And the record company had accepted her, and they had paid a fair sum for her career to actually take her on as an artist. And so Willie had a percentage of that. That came
Wow.
next, literally a couple of days later. And then just before Christmas, we heard that a very dear friend of ours had got a job as a managing director of a major company, record company. So Willie phoned to congratulate him. That was all. Had no agenda, nothing. Had no expectations.
Yeah, there's no hustle involved,
No,
just a
not
sincere
us, not
congratulations.
like
Yeah.
you at all. Very genuine through and through. He phoned to say, "Hi, Paul. I understand you're going to be uh, MD of Universal, and so yes, isn't that great?" He said, "Well, actually, Willie, I've watched you working for this company for the last 5 years, and you hardly earned anything. But the way you've stuck it out, your sheer determination, I'd like you working for me." He said, "I
Wow.
can offer you a job. I'm headhunting you, Willie." He said, "I'd like you to be in charge of." He created a department and he wanted Willie to head it up with his own staff, a whole department. So that's
Wow.
exactly what he started to do. In the new year, he started with a new job with a pretty good salary, which went up in leaps and bounds.
And I think I just think that moment of faith that you had in the
Yes,
cold last 10 pounds and you were up both unshaken. And as you said, like, what else are you going to do? When I think of with my mom and her cancer, and they said, you're going to die in 6 months. And then she started chanting 3 hours a day, right? Once a month, 10 hours. And people go, oh, that's crazy. That's so much. How could you chant for 3 hours? And somebody just told you you're going to be dead in 6 months. what else are you gonna do? Like what? Go swimming and shopping and, like what else is there? And that's the benefit of these dramatic challenges that sometimes we face. And I think that's what that leader had kind of insinuated, that it's like it's fine to have faith when everything's going well, everybody's in love, everyone has a job, and it's the feast portion. But he alluded to the fact that, oh, you'll know real faith when you lose everything. Not that everybody needs to, just not to scare anybody. People don't necessarily have to lose everything. Lots of people don't lose anything. They just gain. But it's more about the spirit, the fact of being fearless. Like, even if things get rough, I'm going to remain unshaken and I know what to do and I can chant and I'll transform absolutely everything.
There was something that we had to change through this challenge, and it was
Yeah.
all to do with our attitude to money, my attitude to money, Willie's attitude to money, the way we behave around money, the way we think about money, how we treat other people as far as financial deals or whatever, because I've been in business as well, as you know. And
Yeah.
it's how you actually behave around money. And when
Hmm.
you actually chant to change something, because things do pop up, that's when you need the courage, because you are chanting to change an aspect of your life which is making you suffer or holding you back. So this is
Absolutely.
precisely why you've got that challenge. You've asked for it.
Yes. And the thing is, if it's coming to you after a period of strong practice and chanting, you can trust it. You can trust what it is that's happened and understand it as the most incredible opportunity to change your life and change your karma. We both had the cancer experiences. I feel bad if I tell people, oh, I had cancer. Everyone's face drops and go, oh, no, are you okay? I'm like, no, no, I had a great time. Like, calm down. Like, honestly,
Oh,
I
yes.
had a great time. I
Mm.
grew so much. I chanted so much. I connected with so many people. So it's like, no, 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 don't worry. Like, the cancer became this phenomenal experience. And the same thing for you. Like, losing everything became a phenomenal experience because I think both you and Willie deeply, deeply, deeply changed your karma around wealth and money. And the best part is because of your spirit, Jenny, you found it exhilarating.
Oh, yeah.
you, you were like, let's go, let's change this. And I think too, one of the things I want to mention as well, like when we were, during the cancer tozos, the Renaissance tozos that I started in 2020, you and Willie would often come and encourage anybody who was on that Zoom. One of the things at the time I remember both of you talking about was to look to Nichiren Daishonin, his spirit at Tatsunokuchi. So we have talked about this idea of the Tatsunokuchi prayer. So for those of you who don't know what that is, at one point, Nichiren Daishonin was being harassed by the authorities and they simply wanted to behead him and get rid of him. And what's fascinating to me is when you think of Japan at that time, and you think, here is this Buddhist priest, according to them. He doesn't have any money or wealth or status of any kind. He had no power, influence, really. He wasn't some famous priest or something like that. And yet, the kind of opposition he brought out, like hundreds of soldiers showing up at his home, hundreds. Why would hundreds of soldiers be needed for this one man? And the reason was he was saying everybody is equal. I think there's this inherent threat that level of truth and goodness causes for people in power. So even though I still to this day go, wow, like why did they freak out so much? But at the same time, I know because he was a threat to society. He was a threat to the world because he was saying everybody has an enlightened nature. Everybody equally has access to Buddhahood. And he was saying men, women, young people, everybody, anybody. And all of a sudden, he gets 100 soldiers showing up at his door. And not only that, he gets hauled off to be beheaded, which is the Tatsunokuchi incident. So here he is in the middle of the night because the authorities didn't have the courage to do it during the day because it was illegal. So he gets hauled off in the middle of the night. And then his closest disciple, Shijo Kingo, who's a samurai, is notified and accompanies him. I talk about this all the time, Jenny, and so do you, because it's such an inspiration on how to chant and how to face an obstacle, and it is an example of the kind of power we have. And so basically what happens, long story short or long story long, he is about to be beheaded. He goes, hang on a minute, I'm just going to have a little word with the universe and the Buddhist God. We say Buddhist gods for 2025. Buddhist gods is really the forces of life in the universe that are around us. So he has a little chat with all the forces in the universe. And he essentially says, I'm a votary of the Lotus Sutra. My life is committed to the enlightenment of all people. The universe and life itself promise to respect a person that is enabling the enlightenment of all people. And he demands protection. He's like, you better do your job. He's like, or when I die, I am going to report it to the whole universe. So this is metaphor, this is story, but so it's kind of hard if you don't understand Buddhism, go, what are you talking about? What do you mean like Buddhist gods? I want to make it accessible to anybody who's not a Buddhist. Basically, we all are part of the universe. We have access to life. We all have access to the universe. And part of our delusion is that we do not understand our power. And part of Buddhism is to explain to us our connection and our power. So in any case, he knew what his life was committed to. And so when I think of him, this isn't the official writing, but when I think of him in that moment, I think he was saying to life itself, do you understand my commitment? Do you know who I am? Do you understand how committed I am to my mission? Do you understand the good that I will create? Therefore, I must stay alive. I must be kept alive because of my vow. We say vow in Buddhism all the time. Because of my commitment, you are allowed to demand protection. A combination of a vow attracts protection. So he basically goes to be beheaded, absolutely fearless. Absolutely. Like, I know who I am. I know my mission, and the universe better do something. And what happens? A bright light or a comet goes through the sky. There might have been a bright star. We don't know exactly what it was. There was something bright that went through. Again, could have been a comet. It scared the heck out of the executioners, and they all ran away terrified. And he was still so confident in that moment. He said, hey guys, like, come back and finish the job. What are you so scared about? Like, he literally taunted them when they ran off, because he was so confident in his vow and in his mission and the good that he was committed to. And I think it's that commitment to goodness and to people and to Buddhahood that allows us to, like, summon up power in our lives and summon up energy from the world around us. And so when we've spoken about this Tatsunokuchi prayer, it's like we can have that prayer too at these very difficult moments, whether it's cancer, whether it's I have no more money, whether it's I can't bear the sadness anymore. It could be an emotional attack. I just don't want to live in this world anymore, right? It can be one of those moments. In that moment, if we can bring out that remembering of what we're made of and that courage and chant with that same spirit and recommit, deepen our commitment. It's like, no, the world's going to be better with me in it. And because I'm going to do good in this world, then things have to change and I have to attract positive results and protection.
I love that story about Tatsunokuchi. And it was that vital moment, you see. And when that vital moment comes, we have to take advantage of it. We've actually got to spring like a lion. Sensei says we must have the spirit of a lion. The Daishonin says the lion fears no other beast. Courage is an absolute condition for attaining Buddhahood, and courage is the absolute condition for becoming happy.
Now we're being taken back to, like, the title of the podcast. We can't actually be happy without it, because without it, we're weak.
I think the most wonderful thing about it was Shijo Kingo, who was one of his greatest disciples, beloved disciples, went with him, and he was holding the reins of his horse, and he was sobbing because he could see that Nichiren Daishonin was about to be beheaded. And Nichiren looked down at him. He admonished him. He said, I don't know why you're crying. This is in lay language, obviously, without reading it. I don't know why you're crying. This is the most incredible moment of my life. And he went to the Hachiman shrine, and that's when he actually wanted to just go in front of the Hachiman shrine and say some prayers. And that's when, as you said earlier, Lydia, he was summoning up the powers of the universe. And at that crucial moment, what he's done in the Gosha is to teach us that we all have that same power. We all have Buddhahood. And every day when we chant to the gods and we manifest that Buddhahood, and we chant to manifest that Buddhahood, we chant to manifest it. And with that manifestation of Buddhahood, quite naturally, you're going to build courage and compassion and
Mhm.
wisdom, the three wonderful attributes of the Buddha.
Absolutely. And now in 2025, in June, I know both of us are quite concerned about the world
Yes,
and
very.
the patterns that we see
All
happening,
terrible.
and we both have a quite the fighting spirit in general about a lot of the stuff that's happening. It does, I mean, to me it just seems like courage is like the rarest commodity these days. The one we need courage more than ever in this moment. Do you want to say anything?
Right through the history of humankind, the ordinary person has been the one to make the changes. It only takes one person to make a massive change. It's the butterfly effect. One person makes a change. It's like the fluttering of the wings of a butterfly. That actually has a profound effect on the whole world, even though it's just a little butterfly. So one
Absolutely.
person standing up and having the spirit of Nichiren Daishonin, regardless of religion actually, is stand up with that courage and never ever give up, have that steely determination, then we can make a difference to the world. And together as ordinary people, together, we can make the changes. As this
Hmm.
world is going into crisis, where every day you read something which is pretty terrible, but we ordinary people have the ability to actually call upon those universal forces. But just being together and having a common cause, we can make
Hmm.
a huge difference. If one person can make a difference, which they have throughout history, together we can certainly make a difference. And even if we are literally chanting for things to change in the United States or the Middle East or Ukraine, our daimoku, our chanting, the power of our daimoku is reaching every single part, and it's so bad now because there are members in our organization who are practicing for the first time in the history of humankind throughout the whole world. We're not only changing our own karma, we're changing the karma of our family, we're changing the karma of our community, our city, our country, our continent, and we're changing the karma of the world. And now we've got members all over the world who are all chanting to definitely change their own karma and to build wonderful courage, wisdom, and compassion in the world, and to bring about change by changing ourselves. We're all changing our environment automatically. And so, with all of these people doing this incredible daimoku, no wonder we have such big challenges now. No wonder. Looking at it that way, it's quite heartening because you know that you know together we brought up all this horror because it was there anyway. It was bubbling away. It's been bubbling away for donkey's years, and now it's all come to the surface big time. And it's shown its ugly face, and we can see exactly what we're fighting. So now have reached that crucial point in time. I feel very strongly with my heart that 2025 is that crucial moment, that we must be very courageous. Now is our moment to be courageous as ordinary people to bring about the change, and it will definitely happen. I feel in my heart there are too many good people on the planet. And of course, the more you see, they say fear builds on fear, courage builds on courage equally.
Well, courage spreads.
That,
Contact, when you're in contact with a courageous person, it just brings it out in everybody. It's
oh,
like people remember what that feels like, and they're like, oh, I have that too. So I think it's so important that we understand our mission and our role to be really great examples of, of courage at this moment and of hope, like unshakable hope. Because if we can maintain that, then we can have all kinds of things happen that we weren't expecting. But if we start to shake, particularly the people who are chanting, who have access,
yes.
they have the phone line to the
Oh, yes.
universe. As far as I'm concerned, to the
Absolutely.
consciousness, we can't shake. And if anything, we have to be stronger than ever before. So it is exciting and it is an adventure. I'm going to go back to that quote that I pulled. I landed on it was in this book, the Discussions on Youth book, under What is Kindness. And there's an article where Daisaku Ikeda is talking about cowardice begets cruelty and courage begets kindness. So there's two aspects of that. I was at a discussion meeting a couple of weeks ago at our house, and somebody was saying how all the wars and all the things that are happening in the world right now are because of insecurities of people. And it kind of threw me for a loop, because like when I think of, all the wars and all the struggles and all the violence, insecurity is not the first word that comes to mind.
No,
Usually it's
no.
aggression and anger and evil
Oh,
and
yeah.
all these other words.
Yes.
And he's like, it's just all insecurity, because we were talking about the importance of being confident within our own individuality and respecting our lives, because when we respect our lives, then we can respect everybody else's lives. So it's not all about me, like I'm so great. It's more about, if you are able to embrace and respect your uniqueness as you are, you're able to give that to other people. And then you're able to live from a place of really deep confidence. The opposite end of that is that if you do not have a sense of self or confidence or self respect, let's say you feel empty or unworthy, it's very easy to recruit you into the wrong groups. And B, because you have this insecurity, then it's very easy to like want to lash out, be aggressive, like go the negative route, because you don't have the strength to stay in the positive realm. It's weakness. It's truly
Yes.
weakness
Yes.
that infiltrates all these movements that want to oppress people, start wars, take over, divide. These are not shows of strength. These are actually expressions of cowardice, of insecurity, of delusion, of not understanding who you are or what you are. The main thing that I wanted to share is this idea that when there is cruelty, it is coming from cowardice and weakness. It never actually, in fact, comes from strength. And when you have true courage, and that always leads to compassion. And there's a notion in this Buddhism, I can't remember who said it. It might have been President Toda, but he said that compassion is actually very difficult to get. It's tough for somebody to have compassion for lots of people. That's not very intuitive necessarily for most human beings. And he said that, but you can always replace compassion with courage. And that means like you have the courage to talk to people. You have the courage to believe in people's potential, the courage to have hope, the courage to speak out. And in finding your own courage, you're going to bring out compassion. You're going to bring out kindness and awareness.
Well, I think it's a very interesting that you should talk about when you heard somebody discussing the fact that it's based on insecurity, because that's the last thing I would have thought of. Because you see these bombastic characters lasting their way through life, but you can actually see the insecurity there. You can actually see it. And of course, cowardice against cruelty. Of course it does. It's like a cornered animal. They're going to lash out. They want to cover up the fact that they are terrified deep down and they are insecure. And they try and mask this with their chest thumping, egoistic mannerisms. They try and mask that with their actions, the way they behave and the way they shout. We know all about that, especially in world politics. It makes absolute sound sense that it's down to insecurity.
Because if you look on the other side of it, when people really respect their lives and understand the beauty and the dignity of life, you're wealthy on the inside and there's no need to diminish or oppress others. If you're actually happy with who you are, and you have a natural sense of self-worth, often you will see the worth of others and there will be no need to go to aggression. Like aggression is often connected to self-hate. It's a disrespect of life. That's where it fundamentally comes from. Is like you disrespect life. And I remember that book on was it Jason Stanley? It's the short book on about what it's a short book on what is fascism. And it really struck me, that first point where he says that in fascism there is a belief in hierarchy. And I thought, wow, that's the opposite of Buddhism. It's the opposite,
Oh,
which
totally.
is why Nichiren Daishonin got hauled off by 100
Oh,
soldiers.
yeah.
Because Nichiren Daishonin was saying, hey, 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 there is no hierarchy when it comes to humanity, that everybody is worthy of respect and everybody has equal access to Buddhism. And fascism is the opposite. It is the staunch belief in hierarchy. It is a staunch belief that some people deserve to be at one level and other people are in many levels below. And then there's some people that deserve to be at the bottom and they're expendable and we can just use them for whatever we want.
Yes.
Fascism is a belief in hierarchy. And Buddhism is a belief in the dignity of every human being and of life itself. So one is expansive, and because it's so expansive, there's such an amazing stability and a grounding that comes from that level of understanding. This is June 21st, and it was a couple of days ago that the strike on Iran came from the US. And I think many people just felt sick to their stomachs. I know on the day, and I spoke to you around that time as
Yeah.
well, it felt like somebody just put lead in my insides. It was just this
Oh,
heaviness
shocking.
that hit. And because I thought, oh, okay, we can't be doing this again. And then at the same time, luckily, this is as Buddhists, we can redetermine and go, okay, this is going to be bigger and harder than we expected for this lifetime, but at the same time this is our time. And it was interesting because the next morning I woke up and I had this phrase in my head, and I posted on Facebook, and it was, the universe is hiring. The universe is looking for people who can stand up. The universe is looking for people who, in this
Love it.
dark moment, will recommit to peace, recommit to compassion, courage, all the qualities of Buddhahood. That's what the universe is looking for right now. And who's going to stand up for that job? And I had a bunch of Buddhists put up their hands. It's like, I'm taking the job.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yes, please.
and I was thinking, okay, so what's the salary? What's the benefit? The benefit is you get to keep your humanity. You have the eternal joy of your humanity. You get to be an example of what people are capable of in the darkest of times. And you get to have the spirit of Jenny's grandfather. There's war, there's people suffering, and I'm going to do something. I don't know what that something looks like. It's going to be different for absolutely everybody. For some, it's attending a march. For some, it's engaging in our community. For others, it is doing something in art. It can be many different things, but if in our hearts we make that determination, absolutely, I'm going to be unshaken. I am going to be even more hopeful, even more committed than ever before, then that's the response life is looking for. And it wants as many people as possible in the world going, okay, I want the job. I'm going to stand up. you know, I'm going to do the work right now, because what is more important than that? If you've got kids or if you don't have kids, even if you've got dogs or cats or nothing at all, what is more important right now at this moment in history than being part of that force of human beings that are recommitting to peace and saying, no, not again. We're not doing this again.
I
It's not
love
happening.
it. Lydia, I love what you just said. The universe is hiring. I love that. I love it. The universe is hiring. And it's quite true. And we have reached what we were talking about earlier, the Tatsunokuchi moment. This is where we're at right now. We're at a Tatsunokuchi moment. I mean, there are people I talk to on Facebook who so they are desperate for encouragement. Even there are many members who are practicing this Buddhism who find it overpowering and difficult to handle, because it is overpowering and very difficult to handle. I'm going to be very honest now. There are moments when I
Yes.
really lose it and I get really, really angry. I get so angry with the leadership that we don't have in the world at the moment. People are not standing up. In cabinets and things, they will not stand up and say, no, I do not agree with this decision. They will not
Yeah.
do that. They carry on going around brown nosing each other and staying in the shadows. Cowardice begets cruelty. And that's exactly what we're
Yeah.
seeing. It's so right. So right.
And in the beginning, it can look like, I don't want to get too involved. I don't want to be too emotional about this. Everybody calm down, whatever it is. But that pathway of cowardice, the destination is cruelty. Daisaku Ikeda made it very clear where that road leads to. Whereas courage leads to kindness, to value, to dignity. I don't think social media has been a big help for
No,
raising people with
not at
courage.
all.
I'd love to see courage be fashionable again, or trendy again, or go viral again. You know, stories of courage, examples of courage, people of courage. That is what I would love to see go viral right now in 2025. So I know that because you changed your wealth karma and money karma, you were able to retire in your 50s and found yourself in your late 50s with figuring out what to do next, and that led you to a career in art. So I wanted to ask you to say a few words about that shift.
Yes, of course. Yeah, after a lot of chanting, I decided I was chanting in a way to sort of figure out what I was going to do the rest of my life. I didn't want to do nothing. I didn't particularly want to go back into business. So I thought, right, what am I going to do? So I chanted for 3 months, and after a few weeks, a little voice came in from the universe saying, "Become an artist." And I shook it off, and I fought with that little voice for 3 months, and then I ended up giving into it. So I decided to go and train. But whilst I was training, I was actually selling. So I was becoming a professional artist. And I did my first solo exhibition in London. And then we moved to Spain permanently. And our old Spanish house serves as a gallery because it's got very high walls. So I have private exhibitions there and shows. I do quite a few exhibitions, and I am fairly known. I'm a little fish in a little pond, like the little ships that went across the channel to go and pick up those soldiers with my lovely grandfather. I love working with the figure. I love working with dance. I love painting movement, anything with movement. It's not about selling, it's about actually putting something on a canvas that's going to lift the soul. I'm known for my very colourful paintings. And recently I've made another shift because I've been invited last year to work to a relatively political theme, and I did love the challenge. And that was extremely successful. You know, the world's on fire. So I've been working on pieces that actually touch on that. It's very, very uplifting, and always there's always hope in whatever I paint. There's always an element of hope because that's what the world needs right now, going into our renaissance.
Absolutely.
Yep.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much for that, and I'm so happy you're contributing to the Renaissance in that way as well. So now we're going to close. It's been a really fantastic discussion. We've discussed many aspects of courage. So I just wanted to end with you sharing your favorite quote and two of them, and I will share my last two. So go ahead, Jenny.
Okay. Well, Nichiren Daishonin says it's a very short quote: "A coward cannot have any of his prayers answered. A coward cannot have any of his prayers answered." And then Sensei says here about courage: "Great individuals fight abuses of authority. The truly strong do not lord it over the weak. People of genuine strength and courage battle against the powerful, the arrogant, the authoritarian, the evil and corrupt, all who look down on the people with contempt." So we, I feel, are working in the opposite direction.
You just reminded me of this term fighting daimoku. Well, it kind of came out more strongly in SGI maybe several decades ago, I think. And at first, some people are like, oh, I don't like the word fight in there. But I can't think of a better word because we do have to fight against our own negativity, against our own limitation, against our own weaknesses. Like it is a fight. So I think fighting daimoku is the right term if you understand it correctly and deeply. And when a seed grows through the soil and has to come up to the top, that's a struggle. That's a fight for life. I think now more than ever, it is a time for that kind of chanting real, strong, courageous, compassionate chanting stronger than ever before. And when I think of the sound of Daisaku Ikeda's chanting, it's never lackadaisical or super
No, no,
slow or lifeless. It is dynamic and creative and it is fighting chanting. It's
it's the
like,
lion's roar. Basically,
right? And so to close on my end, I'm just going to read two more quotes from Nichiren Daishonin on cowardice and the opposite, courage. The one is from the famous writing Reply to Kyoto, which Jenny also read from. And he says, "But your faith alone will determine all these things. A sword is useless in the hands of a coward. The mighty sword of the Lotus Sutra must be wielded by one courageous in faith." So that is all that we need, courageous faith. That's the key to everything. And the last quote I'm going to read, this is very relevant for our current time. He says, "Moreover, the entire country is already in turmoil. Should an emergency arise, how could I possibly be a coward?" So I think that moves my heart. I don't know about anybody else's, but that's kind of what I want to leave everybody with. And I'm going to read it one more time. "Moreover, the entire country is already in turmoil. Should an emergency arise, how could I possibly be a coward?" So thank you very much, everyone, for listening. Thank you so much, Jenny, for spending this time with me and with everyone. I'm so happy to give everybody a little bit of access to your spirit and to your incredible experiences. They are just such a great example of faith in action and this Buddhism in action. And we need all those examples to inspire us. So thank you for giving us so many wonderful examples of what it means to practice this Buddhism and to never give up and to keep fighting and creating right till the very end of this particular lifetime. And so thank you from the depths of my heart. I hope you have a really, really fantastic week ahead, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.